Alright, hello, willkommen, bienvenue, konnichiwa, ni hao, jambo, marhaba. It's time for the Armor's Inquisition yet again. Episode 209 on Sunday, the 28th of November 2021. I'm Amish Phil.
I'm Amish Ben.
I'm Amish Matt.
The dwarf, the cripple, and the mother of madness.
We got Guy Murray in the house. How you doing, Guy?
Hi guys, yeah, I'm well. How are you guys?
Yeah, good, thank you, mate.
Good, very good indeed.
I'm loving the setup.
Yeah.
Glorious, isn't it?
So much to look at. I might not be paying attention through half of this.
It's like a magic eye.
You're only getting one wall. You have no idea what's happening on these other three walls.
I know, yeah.
Surrounded.
All sorts.
Just blank. I'm imagining it's just blank. There's nothing else. You piled everything into this one little space.
Yep. Rest is chipboard.
I know.
Yeah, it's just a sound stage. The world is a sound stage.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming, Guy. Matt, you found Guy, didn't you? Somewhere on LinkedIn, was it?
Well, no, I came across Guy on, it was on a BBC news article, actually, and I think you were quoted within it about, I don't know if it was about heroic hearts or just the use of psilocybin or psychedelics in the treatment of PTSD, but I suppose mental health disorders generally. But you've had your own kind of experiences with that, I guess, Guy, have you? Do you want to kind of explain a little bit about, I suppose,
Your personal story, do you think?
Yeah, your story, or where you kind of, how you kind of got into that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the BBC, I've got a little bit of a bond going with them at the moment. So about 3 years ago, I was actually on there talking about how bad my mental health was and PTSD without any treatment. Like almost at my wit's end with the lack of help and care there'd been from, well, in my perspective, the army or charities, or just sitting across other people and being able to connect. So yeah, and then I don't know where to start. Probably me joining the army in 2008. I was living in Somerset at the time. I was 18. I dropped out of college. Couldn't sit still in the classroom. And then when someone came along and was like, "Hey mate, have you thought about joining the army?" I was like, "Nope, not until now, not really." I mean, they came along to our school when I was younger, and I kind of liked it, but I was the rebel. I was always going against authority. I just didn't like it. I think it was just at home, it was a little bit authoritarian style parenting. So just any authority, I was always like, "No, piss off. Like, I don't want it." And then when I was at uni, no, not at uni yet, when I was at college, I just decided that I needed to get out of Taunton. That's where I sort of grew up. And joined the army at 2008. I went into the careers office having no idea who was going to greet me, and he was a rifleman. And he was like, "Yeah, join the rifles." I was like, "Yeah, okay. What do they do?" I was, you're the infantry, so you're the boots on the ground, and you'll be advancing into contact and killing the enemy. I was like, "Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good." I was watching Ross Kemp in Afghanistan, and
Yeah.
somehow that was like, I was like, I don't know, like war crack. I was like watching that, like, yeah, I want a piece of that. I don't know what it was. I didn't know what it was at the time, but I wanted that machine gun. I wanted this power.
You didn't play Call of Duty as well, did you, when you were a kid?
Yeah, oh mate, Halo. I was a big Halo guy. I'd play that obsessively, and yeah, and unfortunately, I was a bit of my mum's partner at the time. He was just a bit of an asshole. And my dad told me, apparently when I went down there after like running away from home one day, I was like, I'm joining the army so I can become a sniper so I can take him out. My dad didn't like him, so they're like, yeah, go on, son.
Doesn't like that.
Yeah, I know.
I don't think you get to take your guns home with you. Or maybe you do.
So yeah, I took myself off to training, just made some like really amazing friends. I almost dropped out after the first few weeks because I was a southerner and I was up in Catterick with like a bunch of northerners.
Yeah.
And I turned up on the first day. I was got my fags out and I was having a fag, probably in quite a Ponzi Southwest sort of way. Probably shouldn't say Ponzi. Yeah. Anyway, probably in like my camp sort of way that I do smoke a cigarette. And someone comes over and is like, give us a fucking fag, mate. And I was like, not if you ask me like that, pal. So like straight away I was up against this like, I don't know, this sort of like masculine force I hadn't really been around because my home environment was quite effeminate with my mum and my sister, apart from this stepdad. Managed to stick out training, made some like best friends. One of my best mates was called Martin Kingett. He was from Essex. I was posh boy. He was Essex boy. He came down my end of the woods, and I went to Dagenham where he was. And we were just, I think we were reading the Twilight books together at some point, like, you know, like sitting on the end of the bed, like stuck in camp because we're not allowed out, like reading this rubbish. And yeah, did 6 months in training, like really began to enjoy it at the end, but it was always a game to me. Like no one could phase me, like the people in front of me, like they could beat me down. And but I didn't really ever think that I was just part of it, you know, I was part of this brotherhood and this bonding, this community. And yeah, joined my battalion in Salisbury Plains, so the 4th Battalion, the Rifles, ex-Green Jackets, like a battalion with a name, like a fiery name. And yeah, I did 6 months in battalion, and then I was out in Afghanistan in 2009. Me, Martin, a guy called Greenie, and Michael Elliott, we were like really close. And well, I think if you had a little bit of intellect and you were like 19 or 18, 19, you're ballsy, you were given a metal detector. So we went out in Afghanistan. It's like, you're going to be Valen men. And we were like, yeah, fucking sick. Go on then, what's a Valen man? It's like, well, you take this metal detector device and it makes noises. And like you hover over the ground, and if it makes a high pitched noise, you get down on your belly and you dig it up and see if it's an IED. So what? Like, I didn't sign up for this, but we just went with it really.
How old were you? Sorry, when you actually got sent out to Afghanistan? Then 19.
19, yeah.
And you
19.
were digging up IEDs at 19.
No, I mean, we did. I think I picked up the metal detector once or twice back in the UK.
Okay. Yeah.
But I wasn't trained like the EOD are trained, like to actually remove these devices. Right, okay. You're like, you as a Valor man with your number 2, so someone who's sort of like watching over you with a weapon, like you walk out at the front of the patrol as you're advancing towards the enemy. Mm-hmm. Clearing a lane so that if you get into contact, instead of diving into cover, because the Taliban would put IEDs in likely places that you would dive into cover, so these choke points, dive into cover, and there's a daisy chain of IEDs in the ground that would kill everyone who jumped in that ditch, for example. So as a Valor men, you'd walk out in front and clear a safe route, normally with 2 Valor men, so you make this lane as wide as you can, so when they fire at you, you turn into the fire, but you get down or whatever it is, and you peel along the line instead of diving into these ditches. So yeah, I remember on my birthday, I was just singing happy birthday to me as I was like walking along sweeping, and over the radio it said like, yeah, the Taliban have said they've got eyes on you and they're about to launch their ambush on your location.
Great.
And you're like, oh, just waiting for this bullet to come from nowhere. And it's like you'd sit down in a ditch, and the Taliban be like, yeah, they're by the red door, we're going to shoot them when they get to the blue door. And you look to your left and there's a red door, and you look 10 meters down the road in your direction of travel and there's a blue door, a red door, whatever. And you just have no other option but to stand up as the first man and walk into that like line. It's just now, like I feel like I wouldn't be able to do it now. Like I wouldn't be able to do it now. Just a fine line between stupidity and bravery on my part.
Yeah, that was something was just coming to my mind as you were talking there about sort of how I suppose your kind of world views changed from sort of now to back then, and yeah, like you said then, whether you could do that again now. Yeah,
I mean, yeah, that's jumping a little bit ahead. Like, but if I give that my mind state now, and we'll get to how, or get to how I feel later on. But at the time when we were in Afghanistan, I knew nothing about politics. I knew nothing about the warlords and like the broken up parts of the country and like who's in control and where even the Taliban came from, what their political motives were, how we knew like the gory details, like they like, I don't even know who they are, that they stone women to death over nothing, or like you get told like these snippets or like, well, they flew the planes into the Twin Towers. So we're told all the stuff that's like, yeah, like I want to protect my country, like that side of it. And that was enough for me. Like I used that to justify why I was running away from home. Like that's what I've realized. Do you know what I mean? And that became my biography at the time. And that's what got me to the front line, I guess.
I mean, to be fair, at 18, 19, you don't know anything. I'm 38 and I still know nothing.
I know, that's the thing, isn't it? You just have no perspective on anything, do you? But you think you do.
Yeah.
Yes, you think you know everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Or I did, rather.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think so, maybe.
Yeah, so, and then I think we lost Rifleman Allen in the first like week or so of being out there. And then Bassett, he was involved in an IED strike, and it suddenly went from like this game to watching people come past in a quad bike with their limbs missing, and you're like, wow. You're like, what the fuck have I done?
Yeah.
It's like, oh shit, like none of this feels glorious. I was just like, what? Like I had a phobia of wasps and I had a phobia of shitting in public. And I remember rocking up and the toilets was a wooden bench over a hole that you'd sit next to someone else on and squat over into a pit full of wasps. I was like, I'm in hell. I'm in Helmand and I'm in hell. It's like the first thing. So I'm there like shaking and sweating, like these wasps crawling around my ass, and I'm like, oh, it was, yeah. Anyway,
that's some pretty intense exposure therapy there, guys.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm better for it now. Nothing compares to that shitty wasp hell that I was in.
I bet, yeah.
And yeah, and then like it was kicking off. I came back on R&R and my friends picked me up from Bryce Norton, and I turned around to them in the car and I was like, I was a bit like quiet, and I was just like, lads, I don't think I'm coming back from this tour. And that was like the start of my 2 weeks break, and they all just like looking at me like, oh mate, come on, like you'll be all right. And yeah, flew back out. I think I was just dissociated, like on the flight back out. I was there like, how am I going to get myself back out there? And just some force, I don't know what it is, just gets you to the airport, waves goodbye to your mum, and you get back out there and you're with the lads again, and you're like, right, let's go. Second half of the tour. That was at Christmas that I went home, or in between Christmas and New Year's. And it was February. Like one day I was out on the front of the main road on a Sanger position. So you have eyes on up and down the road. And the boys were going out for a patrol. At the front was my best mate, Martin. A few guys back was Andy Borthwick and all the other lads who made up that section, who were going out on patrol, going up the road to the other camp, which was up the road. And Martin comes out and I open the gate for him, and he leans in for a fake kiss, and I lean in for a fake kiss, and he goes, "Gay." They were the last words he said to me, because they walked on down the road and they got ambushed from like 6 different positions. And I was watching through a set of binoculars, almost like, yeah, come on, like, let's go, lads. And I watched as around, just as he took around through the face, and I just immediately, I just knew, I saw the life go out of him. Like I felt it. I knew, like, within a split second. It's not like, oh, maybe he's knocked out, maybe it's that. It's that, like, no, I saw life leave his body, and it felt like an energy that went upwards. Who knows if that's true? Who knows if that's just a memory I put in there afterwards? It doesn't matter. And Borthwick had been shot through the back, and it missed. And Andy, sorry, his second name, Andy. He'd been shot through the back, and it narrowly missed his heart and took out his lung. And just the firefight that went on from there. And I was just watching. Well, I didn't. I think I just collapsed to the floor, because I saw myself in Martin. Like the chances that we went through training, we joined the same battalion, we're in the same company, we're in the same platoon. I'm watching as he's in a firefight, and then I watch as he gets shot and he's killed. My brain couldn't comprehend it. It just could not comprehend what I'd seen. And then that's just February. I still had March, April, and February, March, and April to go. I was just, for the next 3 hours, it was just like, just walking around, just like a ghost. And we all looked drained, because he was such a character, and he'd just come into his element out there really as a soldier. And I didn't feel anything for 3 hours until I went for a piss. And it was when I allowed my body to urinate, that's when it just, everything came in. I was like, his mum, his sister, his Nana Moon. My mum, she's going to be at home. She's going to watch his face come up on the news, like she's met him. I can't call home. She's going to worry. My dad's going to worry. And then it's just like so overwhelming, just hits you like a ton of bricks. But this big guy, Felix, came up to me as I was just bawling my eyes out, and he just like grabs me. It's like Muzz. It's like, if you break down now, like that's it. You won't be able to finish this tour, and like we need you on the ground. Like, just you've got to not let this overwhelm you or overcome you. And I was like, well, I want to fly home with him. I want to repatriate his body. I want to be there. I want to take him off the Hercules and like see his family, and just be that, like, be someone who can connect that death with his family and tell them the story of how he died. Like, I want to do that because I feel like it's right. But 1 in 4 of us who were the Valor men, 1 in 4 people in that tour got killed. So we were down to like a few guys who could do that job, really. And you don't want to hand over that job to anyone, can you? Like,
No.
You're owning it. You become so home to the environment, to the ground. Like, is that earth been dug up recently? Is that an aiming marker? Are those kids standing there with their fingers in their ears for a reason, or whatever it is? Like, you can't pass that responsibility over, not easily, or not with a conscience. So I stayed out and pushed it somewhere, pushed it deep down, packed it down, maybe cried a couple more times. And yeah, it just, like, I imagine that was like a black seed of poison that I swallowed that day, and slowly over time, over the next 6 or 7 years, that formed as PTSD, I guess, and really took over my life. Yeah, in an existential way, existential despair. But I couldn't take my life, because I saw how scary it was. seeing the other side, or what I thought was the other side. So I was too scared to take my life, and I didn't feel like there was anything to live for. So I was just like, I don't know. I was living in like material. When I came back, I finished the army. Didn't get medically discharged. One of the officers told me that I basically needed to man up. I'd just been promoted, and me thinking of my friend Martin and coming to tears all the time, it was just demotivation in my work role. And I was there like, nah, like, I'm out, like, fuck this. And I left, and then I started doing winter seasons and summer seasons. So snowboarding in Val d'Isère and surfing in Portugal. Adventure sport and stuff like that was really stimulating and really good for me. But unfortunately, those places are like drugs, sex, partying, like adventure sports. I got caught up in the socializing and the taking the drugs and the drinking and the women.
Guy, do you think you mentioned going and doing adventure sports? Do you think that was trying to sort of replace the adrenaline rush you got in active service?
Yeah. So have you read The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk? It's a great book. Anyone who's listening about PTSD or complex post-traumatic stress disorder, it talks about people, if they've gone through trauma, people are naturally drawn to try and replicate a trauma to try and find a new outcome.
Wow.
Yeah. So a lot of people who've had trauma in their lives, you're trying to, for me, it's a vulnerability thing. It's like, how do I replicate that feeling to get the same feeling from either what happened in war or what happened in my younger life, in my early childhood experiences? And then how can I own that feeling inside of me? And for me, it was like through sport, through learning a skill. Like I use the analogy now, like when I was learning to surf, it's also the same as psychedelics. It's like, when you turn up and you look at the conditions of the waves, you're there like, shit, like, I don't know if I can paddle out, but like within reason. And then you keep trying to paddle out, you keep trying to duck dive, and you get washed back in. Like when you're learning, it's just, it's like so hard to make it out the back where the waves aren't crashing on top of you. So for me, psychedelics are a little bit the same. It's like you're putting yourself in a state where your trauma and stuff's coming up, but in that state, you're trying to breathe through it and find tranquility in the chaos of what's going around you. And that's what surfers can do. A good surfer, they'll look at the conditions in front of them, weave in and out of a wave, take a couple of breaths, a couple of duck dives, and they're out the back in 2 seconds whilst you're still back at the shore. Like, how did you do that? So for me, it was very much like learning a new skill, controlling that fear that was inside of me, and just like trying to own it and master it. Yeah.
You mentioned about the party scene and drugs and that sort of lifestyle. Was that then your introduction to psychedelics, or was that the more traditional party drugs?
Well, to be honest with you, I ended up in like a ketamine den just a few weeks before I joined the army.
Oh right.
Oh jeez.
Yeah. I used to go to free parties. Like when I was dropping out of college, because I wasn't turning up to college, I was finding something else to do with my time. And it was going to a lot of free parties out in the middle of the woods where the police would come and try and break it up or whatever. But it's just a bunch of people just dancing around in the woods, sort of dissociate. No, not everyone's there to dissociate. That's unfair. But like to have a good time. And I used to take a lot of MDMA and a couple of mostly MDMA. And I just used to love the depth of like loving conversation that I'd have with my friends, but then also with like the ketamine thing, I was like, I realized it was unhealthy and I was going down a road that I didn't want to go down. So like the military was that saving grace in my eyes to stop me from that direction of travel. And I think it is for a lot of people, not necessarily just with drugs, but gangs. And I know a lot of people who came from different parts of London who, they were having to take knives or guns into school and stuff like this. So for them, like the military was that lifeline, or that promise, that hope that they behaved themselves finishing school that they would be able to join the army when they're 16, 17. So I could never take it away from anyone. Like now, later on in life, I've met a lot of people who are more left. Not that I really care about left and right anymore either, but people who call themselves left and they're like, yeah, but you know, you went to war, you made that decision. I was there like, you think that's free will? Like a lot of people joining the military, like go and say that to someone's face and see the reaction that you'll get from them. Because for a lot of people, like it was a lifeline. And that's something like that realization now is like sort of, yeah, like I can't take it away from anyone who wants to join the army or that was their motive. Who am I to judge?
Sorry, was it the case that as far as the Allied forces, it was pretty strict and straight-laced as far as narcotics go? Because we know Afghanistan was swimming with stuff, and when the Afghan army took over, there was a lot of problems with them with drug use after most of the Allies had left. So
yeah, man, like yeah, I won't say too much, but there's people get their hands and stuff out there. Soldiers get their hands and stuff when they're back in at camp. Like if you think, like, let's be honest, people who are the most stressed and see the most trauma are the most people addicted to drugs. Doctors, nurses, paramedics, people in the army. Like it's self-medicating. That's what it is. It's like, oh, it's not an excuse. It's like, go and do that job and tell me, like, you know, tell me where your relief is or your release. Like, so
yeah, I mean, I'm not judging.
Yeah,
if it was me, I would probably be stoned 24/7 hours a day just to get through it.
Yeah. So like we came back and we were drinking heavily as per, and yeah, we just decided like to stop the drink a little bit, and we started taking MDMA in our rooms at camp. But if the army had found us out, like we would have been on our ass and we would have been out, no questions asked. I think they've relaxed it now a little bit, but yeah, we would have been out. But we used to, like, when we took those took the MDMA in rooms at camp, we used to sit around and talk about stuff that happened in Afghanistan. Do you know what I mean? Like we wouldn't do, if anyone did that out on the piss, shut up, you idiot, let's go pull those birds. Yeah, let's go.
What do you mean out at camp?
Sorry, not in Afghanistan. This is back in the UK.
Right.
Yeah.
So
like that.
Yeah. So like taking the stuff, you would take the MDMA, and that would enable you to kind of talk about what you'd experienced. And if you were to do that sober, then everyone would be like, "What are you fucking talking about?" kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's you know, there's the persona, the mask.
Yeah.
As a soldier that we put on, because of the people who take us up through training, who have to bring you down out through your emotion and then build you back up. That means you're all calibrating to the same sort of consciousness or the same persona. So you put that mask on, and then when you're around each other, that stays on. Like you are a soldier, and like if you deviate from the schema, if you're trying to change it, then you'll get beat down. Like, you know, through language, or maybe through like you're a weirdo, piss off, or you're not a good soldier, or whatever it is. Like you have to conform like to that collective mind. It's not like always a bad thing. It's that some of it's like it's nice, but
who's enforcing that, guy? Is that being enforced by your peers or your commanding officers? Or
it's there's no one enforcing it. There's just,
are you doing it to yourself?
You're armoring up, aren't you?
Right.
You're armoring up like with, I'm not soft, I'm a warrior, I'm gonna fight, and we're all in this together like that. But we can't be vulnerable or open with each other too much, because there's no space for that, because we're about to go and close and kill the enemy or whatever it is. I mean, it's quite a reductionist view, and I'm not saying that's the case for everyone. And I definitely saw some of the younger guys as I was leaving. They seemed like a lot more chilled and open, but I'm not sure if they've been to Afghan, but there's a whole spectrum of different people. But what bonded us in war was death. They were the deepest parts. They were like, that's where like that's where you connect on a soul level, right? Because you have to put your arms around one another and console one another. So you're at your most vulnerable point, you're at your most scared, and someone puts their arm around you and says, "You're right, bro, I got you. Like, we'll get through this together." That's like the deep forged relationship that you get, because your mind is just, you need each other. Like, you cross those boundaries as men where, like, maybe on the piss you put your arms around each other or whatever, but out in war you're there like, "Oh shit, like, come on, man. Like, it's all right, like, we've got this." Like, proper, it's deep. And then, like, you come back to the UK and, like, you're not hitting that same level of vulnerability, like, or you might do with on some MDMA, or you might do with one close friend, but people don't want to revisit those memories, not all the time. If anything, like, there's a lot of people like, "Don't talk about it, man. Don't, like, why are you bringing it up?" You're like, "Okay, I won't talk about it. It's fine."
That's a common thing I've heard with, like, our grandparents' generation, that a lot of our grandparents who were in World War II, when they came home, they never mentioned anything, never talked about it. That seems to be maybe that's just my perception, but I think that might be a common thing.
Yeah, probably is, isn't it? Or I think the common sort of thing is people didn't talk about it, and then when it got to like an older age, then began talking about it. And that's something, I kind of find is quite often people bury stuff like this, the traumatic experiences, whether it's from war or, childhood experiences, and they go all the way through life and they manage to cope all the way because they've got a job and a family, and then they've got grandkids, and all that kind of takes up everything. It's something to focus on. And then towards the end of your life, all that disappears. Your grandkids get older, you retire, perhaps your spouse or your partner or whatever dies, and then you're kind of left to deal with it. And if you've got all that kind of unprocessed trauma, then tends to kind of pop up if there's nothing there to contain it, basically.
And then the way that parent is towards their child or to their grandchildren, where it's bottled up, because that's the transmission of intergenerational trauma, isn't it? Through our parenting styles, if we can't talk about our vulnerabilities at all, because that brings up way too much stuff that doesn't give our kids the same language to be able to talk about their own vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
So just through the parenting style of men, we'll keep this trauma to ourselves, and it's too much for women to fully understand, or whatever the dynamic is. And then it gets bottled up, and then that sort of teaches the next generation to do the same. But what I think we're finding now, I think it takes 3 years for trauma or 3 generations for trauma to sort of start dropping off within a family unit as it's passed down. Wow. That's what they found. I think that's the Yehuda studies and intergenerational trauma. And now that it kind of makes sense. There's this I feel there is a softening at a societal level now. And I think, like, being at uni at the age of 28, 29, I made an effort to speak to, like, if there were young men or young women, they're being open and vulnerable at, like, younger ages, 18, 19, 20. I'm like, keep that vulnerability, like, keep that level. Obviously, make sure you feel safe. But when you go out there in the world, into whatever way you want to label the world, I still think it's quite a bit of a man's world with, like, armoring up. Like, when you leave uni and going into these work roles, like, make sure you keep that vulnerability and challenge the status quo with, like, what you're doing. And even if you're just writing down what it is that you would do better, make sure you're thinking about that the whole time. So when you leave, you can take what you've learned to a new company. And I think it's just really important to, like, honor that in our younger generation at the moment, because they do seem like they've shed quite a bit, or through the parenting, we're shedding that trauma. So I came back from doing winter and summer seasons. I went to go to Combat Stress, which is a charity who looks after veterans, and I was going there for a 2-week residential course or something, and I got refused because my alcohol and drug intake on. So I'd booked time off work and everything, and a triage nurse called me up, and they're like, "No, you'd have to go to somewhere to support you with your alcohol and drug intake first."
Mm-hmm.
I was like, "What?" So that doesn't make sense. I'm taking that because of this.
Mm-hmm.
I was so angry. Like I thought that was going to like help me. And yeah, my mental health took like a real tumble. Like I had to talk to the Samaritans, and I was sofa surfing or living with my friend in Bristol. It's not that dramatic. I was crashing on his floor. And yeah, and at one point everyone was out of the house, and I had a day where I spiraled down, like so down, and I thought I was going to kill myself. And spoke to the Samaritans, and just someone asked me if there was anything I could do. Like, what were you known for in the army? I was known for having a bit of intellect. I joined as a non-commissioned officer, so I wasn't an officer. I was lowest rank, working my way up to become an officer eventually. But yeah, I turned on the TV to watch some TED Talks on psychology of PTSD, and I really got into it. And I was like, hang on a minute, I might be able to like get rid of this. And on the journey, sort of through understanding my own PTSD and seeing if I can heal myself, then I'll be able to teach that back to other veterans who are also suicidal or thinking, are in this frame of mind. And it just happened that it flicked onto Rosalind Watts's TED Talk on psilocybin for depression, so the active ingredient in magic mushrooms. And I just listened, and then I watched Ben Sess's talk on MDMA, and then Robin Carhart Harris's talk. They immediately became like, my idols. And I was there like, yes, like someone telling it how it is. At this point, my friends sort of say, so basically you just found a way to take drugs legitimately.
That's an interesting way of framing it, isn't it?
I was there like, yeah, kind of get what you're saying, but I was also, I've never been a bad drunk. A few people might disagree with that, like my ex and someone else. But I've never really, like, even my cocaine use just made me think with one mind instead of 6 different minds, like 6 different voices. It just brought me to one voice. Or smoking weed was too intense because that one voice got really intense, and I didn't have like ways to escape that one voice with the rest of my scattered sort of thinking. But MDMA, I just straight away, I was like, that makes so much sense. Like, I just talk from a place of no fear. Like when I take MDMA, I was like, that makes complete sense to me. Like I find it cathartic or whatever. And yeah, and then I was sold. I was like, I'm going to go to uni, study psychology and counseling. And at the same time, on the side, I'm going to study psychedelics and the neuropharmacological sort of effects of these different drugs, and just sort of like made that my side hustle at uni. So the first year I didn't take any psychedelics. I was going to my lectures, and every lecture was bringing up trauma. So I'd be dripping with sweat because you're just straight into like these lectures and be like, this is why you're fucked up. Like
this is something we kind of skipped over. It's like how does it manifest? So we've all probably got different ideas, people who aren't in the game like Matt is, of like what PTSD is and how it affects different people. Is it something that's constant, or is there certain triggers that set things off, or what was it like for you?
That's a good point. So loud bangs, funnily enough, not very good with those. No. And yeah, so flashbacks, but not flashbacks like you see in movies. Just you're walking through a shop, and then suddenly I'm there watching Martin get shot through the face, like. But it's almost like in reflection now, it's like I was letting my mind go there. I know that sounds weird, but there was a certain amount of control that I probably could have had over it, but I didn't have that control over it. So therefore that was a disorder in itself. It's because you've experienced something which, for me anyway, like I was in existential despair. I was like, what the hell is the point in this life? Like, I've seen death. It's brutal. It's nasty. It's scary. Like, every time I think of death, I get vertigo and my head starts spinning because I can't comprehend it. And that like manifests in like the feeling or symbolic representation of like a deep void, which was inside of me. Just a darkness, just despair, man. No hope, or like no. I could be around people and they would make me feel great in that moment, but the moment I moved away from them, I was like at the bottom. I like went into that, plunged into that darkness, that dark thinking, and my thought was I always had negative self-thought. I was like, maybe I'm not liked enough, or like everyone's really chummy with those lads. Like, why aren't I on a level with those lads? Or like those girls, like they fancy those guys more than me. Or just all of those, anything I could pick up from other people, I'd sabotage my thoughts with it. Just like negative self-esteem. I couldn't regulate myself too well. So if anyone around me was hyperactivated, stimulated, then I'd automatically be part of that stimulation. Oh yeah, we're going to take some more drugs. A little voice inside of me like, no, don't take any more, please, for fuck's sake. Sort your life out. But I was there like, no, let's go. Let's party. Oh, 3-day bender? Yeah, sweet. I haven't got any clothes, like any change of clothes, but that's fine. Just making awful decisions, and just my relationships, they were screwed because I was so up and down. Like the first girlfriend I ever got, Charlotte, bless her, she was like the unconditional loving partner. Like the first, I had a high school or college girlfriend, but someone who just poured love into me without asking anything back. And I was there like, she's suffocating. like that's great, but I'm going to do something to sabotage this because, you know, like I don't deserve it. She's too good or whatever. Like maybe I didn't have that language at the time, but that's the way I put words to it now. And I just remember someone in Val d'Isere being like, do you always have this level of drama following you around? I was like, shit. Like, yeah. Yeah, I do. I used to turn up to work drunk. I've been fired on the anniversary of my friend's death like twice. I used to walk out of a nightclub, walk across the ski slopes, take off my going out top or like this thin layer top and have my uniform on underneath. And I walked straight into work out of a nightclub. And they just got annoyed with me, and they're so lovely to me. And they were just like, you're out. I was like, okay. So just, you know, just pure, just drifting on like the highs and the lows. And then, yeah, that was pretty, at night, like just waking up, I like drenched the bed almost to the point where I thought that I'd wet it, but half the sweat was up my back and then I'd have to like put my cover over that, move on to the other side of the bed. And then I'd wake up like dreaming about Martin or dreaming about like apocalyptic style events. I'm talking like birds blacking out the sky or hurricanes chasing me and my family through mazes, and I'm having to try and get them out, not being able to pull the trigger and just being shot 10 times and dying and bleeding out, or like just like insane dreams that just follow you through the rest of the day. And you just say like, wow, like even in my dreams, this isn't going to stop. And then so going to uni, like you're studying this. So then it intensifies, your thought intensifies even more. You already got rumination of these bad thoughts and this negative self sort of view. And then you're going into a lecture and they're telling you even more information. I'm not saying it's their fault, like I chose to be there. Mm-hmm. And then just trying to get all that information in your head and hold on to it. And then I was trying to go to sleep and I couldn't sleep. And I was blaming it on like living on a noisy campus, but I might be able to drift off, but then I'd wake up at 2 a.m, just like wide awake, and I'd stay awake And I had to buy, like, get loads of recording equipment for my laptop to put it all on record, like the lecture, so I could do I'd go there and try and take in as much as possible, but it wasn't always possible. And that the first 6 to 8 months was just like that, insomnia, like turning up every day. It was hard to even just turn up and be there and be present, because I wasn't present. And on a Monday, we'd sit round in a big circle, and I was one of 4 guys in a class of like 30 women. And I listened to women talk about self-love. I was like, what are you banging on about? Self-love. I was like, what is this? Like, narcissistic thinking. Like, I love myself. Couldn't get on board with that side of it. I was all right at talking about stuff, and a lot of people like, how am I meant to follow what he's talking about Afghanistan? And I was there like, no, like, come on, like, it's all relevant. Like, even you losing your dog at the age of 19 still brings on that existential, like, worry, like, well, my dog's dead and I had an attachment to that dog. Like, that's still initiating the same. We've only got a finite number of neurochemicals that can be released when we're thinking about these things, and the body going into this state of fight, flight, fear, freeze, fawn, response, whatever. And then at the end of the year, a friend invited me to go and work up near Dalwhinnie Distillery in the Highlands. It's a whiskey distillery. And I was making coffee outside the front of the distillery. And then in the mornings and the evenings, I was like walking in nature, foraging magic mushrooms. So I had Paul Stamets like book on psilocybin mushrooms. I had a PDF. I'd seen Liberty Caps before because I came from Somerset and everyone's chewing on it. No, they're not. Not everyone's chewing on it. But like I have sometimes. And I was searching in these forests, and there was too many mushroom varieties, and I was like, this is just dangerous or silly. And so I'd been out there for about 3 weeks, and I'm pouring coffee, and one day, like, the sun came out and just like lit up this area of the field, and I looked over, and I swear, like, on my life, this is true. I just saw the top, like, of a chalky cap, and I was like, no way. And I walked out. I wasn't serving anyone. I wasn't like see you later. Goodbye. I found the mushrooms. As I walked out, and I saw the top of the mushroom, and the field that I'd been working in, and the whole time was full of Liberty Caps. So I had to very sneakily, without like the owners of the distillery like seeing me walking around with this cup, and I just every now and then drop down, pick them up, put them in the cup, and see me. And I'd take them back to my campsite, because I was living in a tent, like with another person sometimes, or by myself in a bus, on the edge of this wood, and I'd brew them up with some lemon, make it like nice little ritual, and then pour my little tea, and then sit outside in my camp chair and just like listen to, like, the woods, and watch all the little creatures come and scuffing out, like drinking my mushroom tea. And then I'd go for these long walks in nature, and I just remember just looking around, just being like, this is bliss. Like, London feels like a dot in my mind. And I just remember making a small link, not like an epiphany. I didn't have any big breakthroughs when I was doing this, walking in nature, eating these mushrooms, but it was enough for me to gain perspective on all my problems. All my problems weren't with me in that forest. And then I was like, oh shit. So, like, actually my reality changes from when I leave different groups of people, different environments, and place myself in nature, away from all that stuff. I don't feel like hyperactive. I don't feel depressed or anxious. I sat down by the edge of a river and just sat and meditated. It was at a confluence where 2 rivers would met like that to form one larger body of water. And I sat at the top of the V, like sometimes with 2 of my friends who are up there as well, just like watch the heron drop in through the tree line and like fly like down this river. And I just sit there and just be like, this is heaven. This is heaven on earth. I was like, what else do I need? And And I never really used to appreciate that in the army, because usually you're about to like put on a bergen, pick up a rifle and lug yourself like through the forest, like with some fake enemy off in the distance firing at you. But it just really brought perspective. And actually, when I went back to the tent one night, I made a deal with myself, my little inner child, and I said, I'm not going to speak to you like I've been speaking to you anymore. Like, I'm sorry. Like, if I think about it symbolically, I took a knee, came to the level of like this little wounded child that was in me, and I was there like, let's be nice to each other. Like, let's be a team. And I just remember smiling, being like, oh, this is self-love, isn't it? I was like, okay. I just remember it clicking, and I went back to uni after that summer. And I just sat in a circle with everyone. I was there like, I kind of get self-love. They're like, what, guy? I was there like, kind of get what you're saying about self-love now. Like trying to force it out of my mouth. And I thought that was it. I thought like it was from there, it was just going to be on the up. But unfortunately, like, I had some bad news about my dad, or like had an argument with my mom and my sister, and I just felt the same.
Did it switch?
Depression. Yeah. And I was just like I felt like I was just straight back in this environment. And I just met my previous girlfriend, Lucy, at the time. And I knew that there was nothing she could do. And I knew there was nothing my family could do. And I knew there was nothing my friends could do, but all of them were lovely. Like, you know, I felt supported by all of them, but there was nothing they could do. Like, I already knew that. And then luckily a friend online was like, why don't you come out to Barcelona? And I'll show you a method that I have with LSD, and we'll see if we can shift your PTSD when you come out. So I boarded a plane and had the bumpiest ride to Barcelona in like a freak storm that they had. Even like the stewardesses were like screaming, like, and that's not a good sign. You usually look to them for like, you know, like a bit of clarity that we're not going down in this storm. And that was just the start of it. I was like, oh, I was there like, just put me down. Like, I'll do anything, God, like whoever you are. And landed in Barcelona, and then made it to this random chateau that he was looking after. I'm not sure they call it chateau in Barcelona. And rocked up and met him and his partner. It was just those two there, and they're really lovely. And I went on a walk with the guy. So it was a guy who was probably about 10 years older than me, and his partner was about the same age as me. I went walking with him the next day. And yeah, he had some rapé, you know, the stuff that people they get it blown up their noses at the start of like ritual and ceremony, and it's meant to like clear the mind. Right. It was just horrible. Like, whatever he blew up my nose, I was there like, oh God, like, it's like, no, what is this? And it was just getting me to explain this whole story that I've been explaining to you, and I'm just going over it and it's like, oh, that's interesting. I'm there like, oh, that's all you got to say, is it? Like, I don't know like what I expected him to say. So the next night we took a triple dose, so like almost 400 micrograms of LSD, so like 3 drops of a pipette, liquid form onto my tongue. Like, they've made like a really nice setting in front of an open fire. And yeah, just when we went into it, and after like an hour, I was lying with my head in his partner's lap, like going over the story. And the guide was there like, oh yeah, okay, sure, yeah. And I was there like, what does this man want from me? I was like, I'm opening up, like, I'm telling you everything. And he was like, yeah, okay. And after a while, he got bored. He's like, let's stand up, let's take a walk outside. So we take a walk outside. We're walking around the grounds, and he's like, look at this leaf, like the same consciousness this leaf has, you have in you. And I'm there like, yeah, I've heard this stuff before, mate. I'm like, just pure resisting. I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm one with nature. Nature is one with me. I get it. And he's like, okay. And he takes me to like the front of this church. And he's like, inside of here is divine beauty. And he's like, but you can't walk through these doorways with any sin or anything like left inside of you, and that's gonna, that you can't take it through these doors. So I was like, all right, mate. I was like, just going around in circles with my story and this narrative. And he was like, Guy, I love you. And I was like, all right, yeah, I love you too, bro. I'm tripping balls. Like the sky it looks like something from Stranger Things. It looks like if all your lights were like even more illuminated in the background of you, like everything's just melting into each other. And this guy's telling me he loves me. And I'm there like, yeah, man, like, cool. I love you too. And then he's like, no, I love you. And I'm like, I'm not gay, mate. I was like, I'm not gay. And he's there like, you're more gay than you know, Guy. And I was like, I was like, great. So I've come to Barcelona and I'm about to be raped by a guy in a castle, many miles away from anyone. This is it. I've got myself into the situation. And then his partner so he's also tripping as well. So he's tripping with me. His partner sat off to one side, and I run over to her, like, save me, like, like she was the mother figure in this, and he was this like father figure, but also like lover figure. And it's like, if you're into Jungian psychology, like people usually have like the father lover combination that we look up to as like, or like women sometimes look towards men, or men look towards women as a caregiver and lover. And I was like, obviously projecting all this stuff onto them. And she was like, Guy, why don't you go and have a walk? I was like, I feel attacked. Like, he's like, what's he doing? Like, I'm scared. And she's like, why don't you take a walk around the garden and have a think about it? Like, go in and try and find why you're scared. And I walked around the garden. And I was thinking, like, my name's Guy. Like, all through my life, people have been like, gay guy, or like changing, like, on the U on my books, like making it an A in my like school books, so I'd get it and I'd be like, great, gay Murray again today, am I? And I just my sister's gay and everything, and I was like, why have I just suddenly felt attacked? I was like, because all the boundaries are dissolving in your mind, and I was just there like, I don't care. And when I realized I don't care, I went back over, I was like, I don't care, like, I like men, like, cool, but he was there like, and I was there like, I can't receive love from men. And he was there like, can you at all? And I was like, no, like, I feel uncomfortable around guys, and it's probably because of like my stepdad and moving away from my dad when I was really young, and I started to join the dots. I was like, when I walk into a social environment, I come in with my armor on, I'm like, yeah, you're right, lad, so what's going on? And I was like, there's just all this armor that's on me. And he was like, give me a hug, man. And I gave him a hug. And instead of doing the hug, I gave him a hug and relaxed into him. And I was like, oh, shit. I was like, oh, man, like, I can fucking hug. And it was like my central nervous system just went, and I was like, oh my God. I was like, I feel great. And then we went back inside. Oh, we opened the door to the church. There was fuck all in it. There's nothing in there.
It sounded, it was quite interesting that you were able to maintain your kind of walls or your barriers whilst on a triple dose of LSD. So it's that ingrained, sort of like how you were coping with things, and
that was the resistance. Yeah, like that was the resistance to him. Like, oh yeah, look at this, and like he could feel it, or the story I was telling all the way through. He knew that there was someone behind that story telling it, and it was my ego slowly dissolving as I'm taking these drugs. So that was about 10 hours into the trip. So it's like, it lasted about 12 hours or maybe 13 or 14 with the amount that we took. But we went back inside and we sat down, and they gave me some space, and it was almost like they could see some processing going on. And I was just sat there, and it was like, I've described it before this way. It was like everything in my life had been all right. I started to realize, like, you've had this victim narrative, this low self-esteem. And it just reminds me of that Marianne Williamson poem. It's like, our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we're powerful beyond all measure. And I just started thinking that way. I was like, this narrative has been holding you back. And I began to see what that narrative had been made of. Like, the Gordian's knot had been lifted out of all this knot, this emotional knot inside of me. And then it was just like laid out in these strands. And I was like, well, that makes sense. That makes sense. That makes sense. The only thing that makes sense is not like this that doesn't make sense, this PTSD diagnosis. Why have I identified with it? Because it was a way of getting people to feel sorry for me. Maybe like a narcissist, like an abandonment wound. Like I wanted that care. Like whatever it was, I just knew at that point that was chosen suffering. And then like the Dalai Lama stuff started making sense. I was like, oh, like pain is inevitable, but suffering is choice, or like something along those lines. Yeah. And just inside something clicked, and then it felt like my chest was open, and I had this like minute trip where it just felt like direct love from the cosmos was just pouring straight into me. And I was just there like, I was like, oh my God, I love myself, man. Like, what is this? And it was just self-love. Like I hadn't felt that because I'd never managed to form deep attachments with my people around me. So my name's Guy Allen. And my uncle was killed, who was called Alan, the year before I was born. So I was born into a grieving family. So I was in the womb when my mum was still grieving. So I came into the family dynamic as my mum and dad was sort of beginning to break up. So if your parent, bless her, like if she's going through like this huge emotional, she was the middle child and now she's become the top child, like with my auntie. My nan went into depression for many years. My granddad was looking after my nan. So that's fight, flight, or fear response from my mum, or like having to hold on to this. And that level of cortisol is going straight through the womb, straight into me, which means I'm born without an ability to absorb cortisol as much because those cortisol receptors are potentially damaged, which means my temperament's being shaped in the first year of life, which means my mum can't regulate herself so that I can't learn how to regulate myself with my mother. So I switch to secondary responses, which is going inside, which means I can't receive love from the outside. So then when I hug Ralph for the first time since I can ever remember, my central nervous system, apart from sex, which is why I used to be addicted to sex, my central nervous syncs with a man's. And I'm like, oh, so this is a rewiring of like that initial limbic system, which was shaped in the first few years of life. This is like the first memories that are emotionally encoded in my brain because I never had access to language to process those memories. So this is going in real deep. And I'm just having all these thoughts. And when I have my eyes closed, all these religious symbols are flying at me. And I don't think like this, I just have fun with this. Like, this is what I saw, but I don't think that I saw God or what. I don't know. I just don't care. Like I had this image of where I was stood at the back and there were people walking along this path into light and all these religious symbols flying out of the light towards me. And there were figures, like blackened figures because of the silhouette of the light that was shining at me. People were giving them a hand up onto this path, walking into this light. I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to help other people find what I've just found right now. And I came round and I said to the guide, I was like, I'm going to be sick. He was like, quick, let's go outside. And I went over and I was sick, the blackest bile that I've seen come out of a human being. It was like tar from the pits of my stomach. The dog almost started eating it. And I was there like, no, they're my demons. They're my shadows. I was like, you don't want to ingest that stuff. And I think it was. And I think that was the bile that had manifest from my depression and my melancholy, and I got it up, and I was just there, and I was just looking at this sick, and I was like, that's what PTSD looks like.
It's so symbolic, that, isn't it? It's such a thing to. Well, that's the other thing. I was quite interested to sort of hear whether you had that kind of religious experience, because it seems to be something that most people describe, like they have some kind of battle, whether that be with like some kind of
dragon,
a dragon, or
it feels like a demon. It feels like demons,
yeah. And then after that, you get through that, and then there is this kind of feeling that you do have a connection with God. That's the way most people kind of describe it, and I find that just fascinating, basically, that process, and it's just repeated and repeated and repeated.
But this is now I'm just reading like great like books to help me with the vocabulary to articulate this, and they're books like on Celtic spiritual wisdom and like words that are religious, and it's like, well, I don't want to like cultural appropriation. I don't want to just describe. I'm sorry, like if I'm describing it in a Christian way, or I'm sorry if I'm describing it in like a Muslim, like, or whatever. I'm just sorry if I'm just taking your words, but right now they seem to be the only words that I can use to describe my experience. Until now, I pair it with science, which is the bridge for me between science and spirituality. Now I understand my surrender to other, specifically a man at that point, allowed me to receive love from this man, which then felt feminine. And it was like I accepted myself for both man and women, or what we symbolically call man and women, inside of me. And I embraced like my effeminate camp nature as well as like my masculine nature. And then I realized I was consciousness behind both the symbolic masculine and feminine. It's just all a story we've told each other, but we're just consciousness inhabiting these bodies. And I so happen to have masculine, like a male sex, and that's cool. And actually now whoever I come across, I can just be intimate with. And then I realized in there, I was like, agape love for all mankind and humanity, and eros love, what you choose to have with people with your language, with safe boundaries, in a safe way, making sure that people are respecting you and you're respecting them. And then this is just something that I choose to have with people when I feel comfortable. But agape love I always have, and that feels like the light, the joy, and the grace that is unshakable now at my heart. Like I feel like I can be with people now who are dying. I feel like I can be with people who have existential despair, or they have anxiety or depression, because at the core, I feel like I can't be moved. Like I can be moved emotionally, and I can feel people's energy, and I can completely take in their emotion and allow myself to reflect that back to them, and be compassionate and attuned and congruent in our conversation. But whereas before I was walking around and I didn't know where my emotional boundary ended and where someone else's began, I couldn't differentiate between my emotions and someone else's. Now I completely understood where I sat in time and space. And that was the first time. And I remember walking out the next morning, I was like, why does everything look different? And the guide was there like, it's called an afterglow, bro. I was like, yeah. And I thought about this a lot. I was like, what is the afterglow? And it's because it's like the analogy, I feel like the weight of the world is on my shoulders. That's what I felt before the trip. But afterwards, I felt that there was no weight. I was just in relation to objects. I was part of it. Whereas before it was like everything looking at me. Like depression is a bit like, it's a little bit self-centered. Like I have to, I admit that now. It's, you think that is because you're protecting yourself. You're inwards like this the whole time, even though you can be gregarious and like have a front, and everything switched. And I was just there like, I just looked up and started looking around and noticing in a different way. And that was just that feeling that's never left me. And now like I can meditate on that feeling. Wow. And I thanked the guys and I cheers, see you later. Jumped on a plane and then came back to England and started telling my story a bit.
How long ago was that? So has it been, so this is the other thing I sort of, I've been looking into it. It was like, some people, you know, didn't necessarily get much from it, you know, when they did it, the minority, I would say. And that's what it's kind of bore out of the research. But some people kind of had like a lasting effect for 6 months, but then they potentially had another dose after that, basically, and that sort of switched it back again. How's it been for you doing it?
So I did that back in February 2019, I think.
Mm-hmm.
That was the big bang for me. Like, it's just not, that was the rebirth.
Right.
I haven't stopped unraveling.
Okay.
And I will never stop unraveling or turning into my fear now. Now it's like I feel wherever I feel I have if I can feel myself being angry about something, it's like you can't have anger. Like the thing that I learned was if through my early childhood experiences I was very sensitive, so that whoever said, I can remember all like nasty things that have ever been said to me, or the way people have knocked my self-esteem. I was that sensitive that all those memories were encoded. And then joining the army, and I just realized, I was like, well, who was I fighting in Afghanistan? And what happened in their early childhood? They were born in poverty, like their family were killed in war, like warlords like lined their family up and shot them. Did I kill the person who killed Martin? Did I kill one of their friends the day before? And I was like, it was in the Bible or something like that. It's like once you learn to love thy enemy, like you realize that you don't have one or something like that. I don't know. Don't quote me on that.
Sounds
but
like
that, that feeling, I was there like, well then sort of like everyone's a little bit forgiven. Like if you're born into that, not like obviously what your actions are, but again, free will. I was there like, well, where was their free will? Where was my free will? And then once I let go of that, like I was like, well, I'm still a warrior. Like I can still fight. I know I've got that in me. Like if anything really comes up, but I'm not going to be sent by any politician to a country I know nothing about, to an enemy I know nothing about, because isn't that like, that's the equivalent of walking down a street and your mate coming over and being like, see that big tall dude down there? He wants to knock you out. And like, we should go and knock him out first.
Yep.
And like not knowing anything about that guy and just like walking up and like just getting in a scrap for no reason. Like it's not completely the same, because obviously the talent, like there's people, you know, people do horrendous things and that gets passed back to us as a country, and they do like, it's just difficult. I don't really like talking about like the right and wrong of that. I just stay out of it now. And just focus on helping people who are like coming back from that environment.
Well, I mean, if all world leaders were meant to, you know, it's mandatory for them to send their own kids to the front lines, we'd see a lot less wars started, I think.
Probably, yeah.
You know, it's very easy to sign a piece of paper, send other people's children into harm. And, you know, we know that over, you know, I guess it's justified in history in certain points of time. Things have had to be done. But, yeah, over the last sort of 30 years, you wonder about the moral foundations of a lot of our incursions, particularly into the Middle East. But, yeah, we shouldn't get onto that. One thing I wanted to pick up were going back to the LSD garden in the church. I found it really interesting how you used the word armoring, and you were describing your armoring being sort of stripped away, and it was totally reminiscent of Peter Jones talking about the psychoanalyst Wilhelm Reich, and he used exactly the same
psycho
language.
armor, wasn't it? Something like that, was it not?
Armoring, he just said armoring. Yeah.
Or have you heard of, is it orgons that?
Well,
Links.
Wilhelm Reich was a psychoanalyst.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, and a very famous and well-respected psychoanalyst before he got into the orgone.
Have you heard of orgone accumulators?
No.
No, stay away from that.
Yeah.
Stay away from it. I was about to write it down.
You can write it down and have a look into it, but it's debatable at best. But it's got a bit of a cult following, hasn't it? Orgone accumulators and stuff.
There was an article in The Guardian, I think maybe about 18 months ago, about him, about Wilhelm Reich.
Yeah,
but it was completely focused on his psychoanalytical work because he was a star in that regard.
Right. Yeah, so have a look into him.
I just found it interesting to use the exact same language.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I imagine if you're doing a counselling course, are you doing sort of psychodynamic counselling or?
Yeah, we do touch a bit on everything.
Right, okay.
Yeah, I can't remember where I picked it up. To be honest, I think it was at one of these tantric events where they talk about de-armoring in that way.
Right.
And then I was like, actually, that really massively applies. Like, I literally armored up. I went to find power because I felt threatened at home by this stepdad who then I was having trouble at school because of him. He taught at my school, and then I don't want to get too much into it. Like, bless him wherever he is in the world. But I was having such a tough time at school, and then I was having a tough time at home that I couldn't tell anyone. I had this abandonment from my friends at school because I was becoming more aggressive because of what was going on at home as a kid. And then also this male who couldn't connect with me as this kid. So he felt that he'd have to use his physical presence and his eye contact and his dominance to make me feel small in my own house, like around my mum and my sister, while he brought my mum and my sister in. And it was like, that is what led me to find this armor and find these weapons, and ultimately got me to the front line of Afghanistan in whatever way. I don't know. Now it's all in the past, and it's processed, and it's a story, and I don't hold, I've forgiven him in my own mental world, my own psyche. It's like,
so the other thing then you kind of touched upon then was sort of focusing on veterans now and helping them. So tell us a little bit about Heroic Hearts and how you got kind of involved with them.
Yeah, so I came back from Barcelona and I just started messaging Robin Carhart-Harris, Ben Sesser, and Robin actually got back to me and he said, message this guy called Keith Abraham. He's a paratrooper. And I messaged him, and because I was there, I'm going to start a charity. I'm going to whatever. I had these thoughts coming back from there. And it turns out Keith was already a few steps ahead of me, and he had been in contact with Jesse Gould in America. They were the first Heroic Hearts project, USA. Right. And then Keith, I can't remember how he got put in touch with Jesse, but Keith was there well, we're not going to try there's no point. We're not here to build a brand or anything like that. We'll just message Jesse, and they formed an amazing relationship. And we copied the structure, and we get support off those. And then we're still launching. We're going through the charitable commission sort of stuff that you have to do to be a registered charity. And we set it up, Heroic Hearts Project UK. We've just been helped by so many people, by Drug Science and the Medical Psychedelics Working Group. And I've done a couple of talks with BBC and Radio 4, and David Nutt was on the same phone call. It was I was I'm on the same phone call as David Nutt. And then I was part of the Medical Psychedelics Working Group. So I'm on this call with the leading professionals in psychedelic research. And I'm just so humbled to just sit and just be that sounds amazing. That sounds amazing. That sounds amazing. And just everyone really got behind this project. And I think Keith's got loads of private sort of people who want to invest. It's not so much accepted yet in the military sort of, or the veteran community that much at all. It's most of the like funding and stuff will probably come through private donors, and then it will spread by more through like word of mouth. But we help veterans in the UK logistically. We help link them with retreats in Peru with ayahuasca, and also in Amsterdam with truffles. So the money that comes in, we plan the logistics, we help them with a bit of preparation, and then when they go to the retreat, they're fully in the hands of the retreat. So we're not sort of interfering with the retreat, we're just getting there. And we've linked up with like Imperial College, and so we're not just there with the experience of the individuals, but we're also conducting our research alongside different universities. So there's two sorts of concepts to what we're doing. It's advancing research so we can help change drug policy. So obviously psilocybin's a Schedule 1, ayahuasca's a Schedule 1, which means there's so much red tape surrounding research. It costs thousands of pounds to get licenses. Politics are involved. They were the original ones who banned these substances without any scientifically backed research. In fact, research showed the complete opposite to what they were saying, but they banned them anyway due to, societal sort of reasons, I guess, with Vietnam War and the hippie movement and the free love. And they're like, these drugs are not, they've clamped down on them. And yes, we've got a first retreat planned next year for psilocybin, and it's for traumatic brain injuries. So people who have suffered traumatic brain injuries, and that's with Imperial College. And we'll be conducting our own research there. And that's also happening in the USA. So it's like, was it transatlantic? No.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like the research across continents now. And Canada, they've just started a Heroic Hearts Canada, and hopefully, like sort of no borders with our research type of thing, and making sure like we're replicating the research across continents. And it's just, once that happens, and the government, the UK government, it's like, how much more information do you need that this is beneficial? When there are people killing themselves to this day, and like, they're my friends, man. It's like, come on.
We know what happened with Dr. David Nutt, don't we? When he stuck his head above the parapet to, suggest changes, he was out the door.
Yeah, sacked immediately, wasn't he?
Well, this is what we played the clip like 3 weeks ago of it was MP Crispin Blunt speaking at PMQ, saying we need to remove the barriers for these I don't know if you call them clinical trials or research or whatever into these substances. What what's the outlook look like on that? Do you think there is the political will to get this done in the near term?
Boris Johnson said that he signed it off, but it's being held up somewhere. The Home Office. I don't know where it's being held up, but we've heard that it might be at the Home Office sort of level rather than at. I mean, I don't know too much about politics. I don't want to put my foot in it too much, but
it would seem part of the problem to me, being a cynic, is that these are natural compounds that can't be patented. Yeah. And research is expensive. It costs a lot of money to set up, long-term clinical studies. And where's the motivation? Where's the money in it?
Big pharma aren't going to do it, are they?
Exactly. That's what I'm getting at. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's got to come from somewhere, hasn't it? And is that the main aim of what you're doing, is to try and raise money for clinical trials, or is that? I mean, how's it going to get done? This is the thing. This is the big. I don't think it matters how much research or how many good thoughts you might have. There has to be someone willing to put the money behind it.
And there are, philanthropists like working in the background who are willing to put the money into it. But I can't wait until the UK sort of veteran population sort of comes around to a bit more, because we raise £3 billion a year for military charities, and it's so you just direct that in a little bit more of a way towards psychedelics. But it's changed. So I'm optimistic. I think in the next, I think in the next year and a half, MDMA and psilocybin will be rescheduled. But what do I know? This is only from like listening, like observing, and just being like.
Well, it seems to
like
be that
positive.
way, doesn't it? But I suppose if it's the Home Office thing, then I suppose is that something to do with policing and all the rest of it? About if it's like from class 1 to class, was it class 1 or class A now? Is it?
Yeah, but it's not. We're not talking about legalization either. That's
No,
like the
yeah.
main point we're trying to drive home. Is
It's
just
medicinal.
rescheduling it
Yeah.
from 1 to 2.
Yeah.
And then it's still a controlled substance. We're not saying like let's open up corner shops like in Amsterdam and
Don't clear out your airing cupboards just yet.
yeah. Make space on your windowsills for the mushrooms.
I mean,
They're that easy to grow, aren't they?
Yeah. It seems like medical marijuana might be the nearest, and that maybe that can just open the gate and maybe allow these.
But it is a gateway drug after all.
Oh, God.
They were right all along.
Right, yeah. Okay, no. Well,
it's like for me, like personally, like if I look at my substance use now, I'm just way more educated on what I'm putting in my body. So today, like actually 3 months today, I've not been drinking alcohol, so I'm going for a year. I quit a lifetime, well, from the age of 17, cocaine use, like most years. Mushrooms, yeah, I might use at a festival or something, but mostly it's like ceremonial use. DMT the same. And it's like caffeine. I've reestablished my relationship with caffeine, so I'm not just drinking that without thinking about it. So now when I go out, I know that it's 4 p.m. I'm going to have a double shot of caffeine. I know that's going to last me up until 11 p.m. and keep me stimulated. It's like once you understand like all the effects of these drugs, you can actually take a lot less and use them safely. And if you want to bring down your alcohol use subsequently, which is like that's one of the sort of leading causes of early disease and stuff like that. So it just means that I'm looking after myself in a different way now. And like that's for me, that's the biggest positive. It's like I want to look after myself. I want to live a long, healthy life. I want to commit my life to research. I want to become a facilitator of psychedelic assisted psychotherapy and like and just help with Heroic Hearts. I'm so humbled to be part of this international organization now, or charity. I feel great things are going to happen with them for sure.
Well, I think that's a good place to
I think
wrap
so
up,
too.
isn't it? On a positive note.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, and it's been fantastic.
Yeah.
Absolutely fascinating.
Yeah,
Amazing.
definitely opened my eyes to different areas of this topic, and let's hope that they pull the fingers out and get this done rapid.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, like literally before anyone else kills himself. It's like that's each person who like takes their life now. It's just like, oh my God.
Yeah, I think it's the very least we owe our ex-servicemen and women. You know, we're very quick to send them into harm's way. We need to start looking after them when they get home.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, on that happy note, thanks, guys. Stay on the line for us while we play ourselves out, and check out the links in the description, and you can go to the.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers, guys.
No problem. Catch you on the flip side.